Do you want bigger harvests, healthier trees, and a pest-free garden? Spray worm castings tea.
I have spent the last 5 years perfecting this recipe. I'm going to show you how to make it at home.
So is this worm castings or?
Yeah, so I'm taking it from the back side where it's mostly worm castings.
Okay.
That white stuff is fungal growth.
I'm Angela from Growing in the Garden. This garden is in Phoenix, Arizona. I want to help you succeed, even if you're gardening in tough conditions. So Zach, what is worm castings tea?
Yeah, quite simply, we suspend microbes in pure water and we blow air in, and that multiplies the number of microbes exponentially. So what we're trying to do is to create a bunch of microbes that we can add to our leaves, our trees, and our soil.
And what does that do for your plant?
Microbes in your soils do a bunch of really, really good things. They do what microbes do. They convert what's in the soil into what your plant needs at the time that your plant needs it. So it's helping to feed your plant regularly. On the leaves, it'll help the leaves thicken, protect themselves from the frost in the winter and from the sun in the summer. It's been scientifically demonstrated to reduce the amount of disease, reduce the amount of pests, and increase the amount of fruit that you get from your fruits and vegetables. We're taking the best things from the forest in a burst of growth and adding it to our trees.
All right, well, I definitely want to learn how to do that. I'd love to hear your recipe.
Okay, so this is a 7-gallon bucket. I'm going to start with 5 gallons of pure well water. If you live in the city and you don't have access to well water, then most of your water is probably chlorinated. You want to fill that bucket the night before and let that chlorine off gas. Chlorine is an antimicrobial, and so it's competing with what we're trying to accomplish.
So it'll stop those microbes.
That's exactly right. So we want it to dissipate before we put it in.
That's good to know.
If you don't have well water, rainwater works great. It's nice and pure and works equally well. So what we're trying to do is take as diverse a set of microbes as we can get our hands on, add them to this pure water, and then add air for 24 to 26 hours. And that aeration of the microbes causes them to multiply. So we're going to start with, I bought a bubbler from a company called T-Lab, and I happen to like it, but this is just a PVC pipe that goes down to the bottom. I'm going to connect that to an aerator, and this is just an aquarium pump. It produces 715 gallons per hour. Okay. I'm going to put this in the bottom of my water container. I'm going to attach it to the pump, and I'm going to hang on just a second before I plug that in. The main packet of material, of microbe-laden material, comes from my worm castings. So this is a worm wedge. It'll be mostly worm poop. As fresh a set of castings as you can possibly get. I combine that with custom-made compost. So this is just compost. We make small batch compost with as great a diversification as we possibly can, and some wood chips, mulch, that I've been soaking over the last couple of weeks. And you can see that white stuff is fungal growth. So we're trying to add fungi. The combination of those 3 things gives me a broad, diverse set of microbes from which to start with.
So since I don't live at the worm farm and I have to collect this from my house, I'm trying to think. So I could go into my vermicomposting bins in my beds and collect some worm castings, and then go to my compost bin, get my compost, and then dig around maybe in my wood chips and look for some that have decomposed a little bit. What am I looking for in the wood chips?
So for wood chips, I would use the stuff that you've spread and you've watered and it's been out there for 4 months, 6 months, a year. That's the perfect stuff to start with. You can see it
starting to break down, so get some of that. So how much of each am I using?
I use 10 to 12 ounces of worm castings. I use 3 or 4 ounces of each of the compost and the wood chips. And then I'm going to wrap this over a couple of times just to keep everything from coming out, and clip it. And then this comes with a convenient strap. And so I'm going to put that in there and attach it to the ring. Once I have my tea bag in, I add other sources of diverse microbes. We find that fish fertilizer or fish emulsion is a really good additive. I use humic acid.
So what is humic acid?
It's an extract from humus that grows in the soil. I'm going to add kelp, you know, NPK, this is the K. We're going to add kelp, which adds nice protozoa. And then finally, we make a emulsified black soldier fly larva fertilizer here at the farm. And I find that the insect frass contains a different set of microbes that give me a really great starting point. Those are the things that I add here at the farm. I've experimented with a lot of different things, and I find that this is the best collection that gives me the most bacterial, fungal, nematode, protozoa growth.
So how do you know that?
We've looked at different inputs, and we've looked at different brewing times. And then we actually take it, and we have a lab here. We look at it under the microscope. It looks like LA traffic when it's moving at its best. Stuff moving everywhere all the time.
And what about for someone who doesn't necessarily have compost or vermicompost? Are these ingredients that you could buy at the store, or where do you recommend getting those?
Yeah, so if you care enough to make it yourself, then you really need the right level of inputs. Store-bought, anything sealed in a plastic bag is going to have diminished microbial activity. So if you're not making your own compost, if you don't have your own worm castings, you can certainly come down here or go to someplace that's making it fresh and get it fresh. Find a neighbor who makes compost. But you do want to get as fresh as you possibly can. Don't buy the stuff that's sealed in a plastic bag. Each of these things incrementally make it better. If all you have is your own compost and your own mulch, you can do this and have a really, really good outcome. Plug it into electricity, and it's going to start to pump air into that tea. And you can see that's what we call a rolling boil. There's no heat involved in this. And that's just pumping fresh air into a collection of microbes, which will make lots and lots and lots of babies. Here at the worm farm, we do this in 100 or 200 gallon increments. And one of the things that we find most effective is to change the tea bag. So after about an hour, we'll pull this tea bag out. We'll dump it on our plants or something that we want to grow, and we'll replace it with a fresh set of compost, castings, and mulch. And that just introduces more and new microbes into the mix.
So would you recommend doing that at home as well, switching out the tea bag? How often will you switch out the tea bag?
So 3 times for the first 3 hours. So we put the first one in when we start it. We come back an hour later, replace that bag with a fresh bag. We come back an hour after that, replace that bag with a fresh bag. We let that go for an hour, and then we take the bag out. So we find that by removing the bag, we get less sediment, and it doesn't negatively impact the microbial growth. Okay, so a couple of tips. Temperature does matter. You want the water to be between 60 and 70 degrees if you can accomplish that. Too cold is not great, but it's better than too hot. Anything above 85 or 90 degrees, you're really wasting your time. Just like too short is bad, too long is bad.
Oh.
So the microbes will consume all those healthy organic material, and mostly with water. The positive, the healthy microbes increase in volume. Somewhere between 24 and 28 hours, we start to see a decline in healthy bacteria. And if we let it go 2 or 3 days, we actually get harmful bacteria that will grow in our teas. Another fun fact is, as soon as you take this off the aeration, the numbers of microbes start to decline. So as soon as you get done brewing your tea, you want to use it. You want to use it certainly within 2 or 3 hours. By 4 hours, it's just brown water. It's not bad for your plants, won't do any harm. But it doesn't have the benefit. You can see that you need the right combination of stuff. You need the right compost pile and the right worm castings. If you have that stuff, certainly doing it at home, it's significantly less expensive, and it's way more convenient, and it shortens the time frame between when it was made until when you can apply it, all of which are good things. If you can't do that, we brew it every Saturday morning, and we'll take care of getting it right, and then if you just take that bottle home and use it promptly, you'll achieve the same outcome.
How often should we apply worm castings tea?
Worm castings tea, like compost, is not harmful to your plants. You can do it as much as you like. In the early fall, to rehabilitate your soil after that rough summer. In the springtime, when things are starting to grow. And in the summertime, just before the summer, to help our plants get protected for the summer. We do it when we freshly plant new trees in gardens. We find that it dramatically reduces the amount of transplant shock. It helps plants protect themselves from pests and from diseases. And we do it anytime a tree is in trouble. So if we come out and we see a tree that's struggling, that's a really good time to add it. And quite frankly, that's the best reason to have a home composting tea brewing system available. We've had trees that got white fly or aphid infestations. We've had trees that have had a variety of different diseases. And in our experience, the worm casting tea solves those problems 70 or 80% of the time.
So my tea's been brewing for 24 hours. I'm ready to put it on my plants. How do I do that?
Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna unplug it. We're gonna take the brewer out. So we just have a 5-gallon bucket of tea. My favorite way to do it is in these hose end sprayers. Put it on the dial that gives you the most amount of product for the least amount of water. So we want as much tea as we possibly can. Attach it to your hose and then just spray all the leaves, spray all the soil. That will get the microbes on leaves and branches. It also gets it established in the soil. So that's one way that you can use it. The second way you can use it is to put it in just a regular garden watering can.
Like a watering can?
And water it. I typically dilute it about 3 to 1. That just makes it easier to distribute. And if you're fortunate enough to have an injector in your sprinkler system, you can add it to that injector and it'll spray it directly through your fertilization system. So
happy plants.
We see that in farms more than we do in backyard gardens.
Yeah, I wish I had an injector in mine. That sounds pretty great. I had a question about spraying it right on the leaves. A lot of times, we try and avoid that, but in this case, it actually helps the plants.
Yeah, so there's been a ton of scientific study about the impact of water droplets on leaves. It takes a very special set of circumstances for that to do any harm. Okay. And it's unusual for us, particularly in Arizona, to have that problem. Like anything else, we recommend that you water in the early morning or the late afternoon, particularly in the summertime. The heat is not helpful for the growth of the microbes. So by doing it in the early mornings or the later evenings, and frankly, early morning is better. It's usually the coolest time of day here. The microbes have a better chance to establish themselves and do what we want them to do. But it's not harmful. If the only time you can do it is at noon, you're better off doing it than not.
Well, Zach, this was a lot easier than I thought it would be. I'm less intimidated now by doing this. I know that I have my own compost and worm castings and wood chip mulch at home. I'm gonna get a couple of these ingredients, and I'm so excited to make my own worm castings tea. Thank you so much.
You're all set.